What is going on, guys, and welcome to PHP Read project. In this project, we will use PHP to populate the content of the website from the database. So our project setup will going to look like this, where we have a website for a suite store. And as you can see that we have a nav bar, then we have the header, then this would be the items where we have our cart. And if we scroll down the page after the About section, we're going to have a store section where as of now, we only have two items over here. And as of now, the items have been hard-coded in the HTML. However, when we're going to be done with a project, you notice that we're going to have dynamically populated all the items from the database using PHP. Now, in this tutorial, we're not going to write any HTML or CSS. So in order to follow this project, you're going to have to download a source files, which will be located in my GitHub. And I'm going to leave a link in the description of the video. Also, you'll need to install a server on your machine. So in my case, I'm going to be using MAMP software. However, if you're using Windows, you can use XAMPP, and I will not going to go through the installation process because it is very straightforward, and there are many tutorials who will provide a step-by-step walkthrough and configuration. One last thing, even though we will be using MySQL and PHP, this will not be a tutorial on PHP and MySQL. So I'm not going to explain, for example, what is a variable. This video is just showing one way how to add data dynamically using PHP and MySQL. Once we have installed a source files and downloaded the software if necessary, now let's figure out what we would want to do with a folder and how we would spin up a server. So in my case, let's just drag the folder that we have to your favorite code editor, and let's figure out what we have in the folder. And if you notice over here, we have a CSS folder, then the images folder, the inclusion folder, which is going to hold some of our PHP code. And this would be a JavaScript we're not going to be using. However, since I'm using a Bootstrap, I have a lot of defaults for the Bootstrap, whether that's going to be a Bootstrap bundle.js or Bootstrap CSS. So just to make our project a little bit more presentable, we used a Bootstrap. We also have a database over here, Suites SQL. And the reason for this database is that I'm going to show you one way of creating the database, and we're going to populate the database with only one item. So I'm going to show you an example. However, to speed things up, you're just going to be able to import the database that I already have, so we can just move on and work with a PHP in the index PHP. Now, first things first, what we would want to do, since we're going to be using PHP, I would want to rename this index HTML, and I'm going to say that I would want to have it as a PHP file instead. So let's change the extension over here to a PHP. Now, also, I want to show you where we're going to be working. So if you notice in the Bootstrap here, this would be the nav bar. Then we're going to have our cart items, and after that, this would be an About section. And then once we get to the store, this is where we're going to have our buttons. And then these are going to be the store items. So the way we're going to do it, we're going to set up a database. We're going to populate the items in the database. Then we're going to connect to a database using PHP. And then we're just going to display these items using a for each loop within our row over here. So for now, like I said, we have two items that are hard-coded, but once we're going to create our loop, we can just delete them or comment them out. However, in order to make things a little bit easier, we're just going to copy and paste some of the parts from this single item that we have right now, so we don't have to write all the HTML and CSS from the scratch. So now that we have looked at what we have in the folder, let's go ahead and let's spin up our server. So like I said, if you have downloaded a software over here, now let me just stop the server, and let's imagine that I just opened it, even though it was just running a second ago. And over here, we can just close it, and let's just pretend that I'm opening again from the scratch. So let's do a quick, and now I'm closing my server. So once I open up a server, the server is going to need a starting file where it's going to be serving the files from. So if you have a map or XAMPP, you're going to have preferences. Now in the preferences, you're going to go over here and you have a web server. So this tells us where is the path to a folder that you're looking for. So as you can see over here, now I have somewhere in my document. So obviously, if this folder is in my desktop, I need to change this path over here. So I'm just going to go to a document group. Then I'm going to look for a desktop. Then over here, you can see that this would be a folder that I'm looking for. And I'm just going to go with this folder. So now I'm serving this folder from my web server over here. So let me just open it up over here. And I have an option of start servers. So once I click start servers, then my Apache server is going to be starting and also my SQL. Now, once the servers have started running, if I'm going to click over here, you notice that this is going to be the website that we're going to be working on. So these are going to be our startup files. So once we have looked at a folder, once we have spin up our server, now let's go ahead and let's create a database. Now, if we want to start using a database, we need to go under tools, and over here you can see that we have a PHP MyAdmin. So I'm going to open up the tab, and now you notice on the left side these would be the databases that we have, and over here we have the interface of actually working and creating databases. So we're going to start very simple. We're just going to create a test database. Now, for the first part of the video, you don't need to do anything because I'm just going to show you a test database, how we can create a database, how we can create a columns, and how we can populate with one item. And then by the end of the video, like I said before, we're just going to use a import, and we're going to import the database that we're going to be using for this project. So if we want to create a database, we're just going to go under databases. Now, as you can see over here, we have an option of database name and right away a button of create. So like I said, we're going to call this database a test, and then we're going to click create. Now, next part is optional. You don't have to do it as you're creating a database. However, it is a better practice if we start doing that right away. So for the privileges, you notice over here, we have all kinds of users over here. So this would be a root user, and then we have any. So in this case, what I would want to do is I would want to create a user that will have privileges only for the database that we're creating. So we're going to click over here, add new user. Then we're going to come with a name of the user. So in my case, let's say that this is going to be a Peter, or let's say Peter over here. And I'm going to call this that this is going to be a local host. So the host name is going to be localhost. Here I'm going to create some random password. So let's say over here 123, and also 123 over here. Now you can also generate the password. However, you need to make sure that you copy and paste it or save it somewhere if you're generating the password, because you always obviously want to remember the password. So once we have clicked on Peter and localhost and decided on a password, we can just say go over here, and we have created another user account that's going to be able to access the database that we're creating. So again, let's go back to databases. Then we have our test database, and as you notice over here, they ask us how we would want to create our tables. So what the name of the table and how many columns we would want over here. So in our case, let's do a table of products. And once we have the table of products, we're going to have 4 columns. Now notice over here, I misspelled it. It has to be products. And here, let's start with an ID, because each and every product is going to have an ID. And type is going to reference what type of value this is going to be. So for the ID, we're going to be using integer, but however, for the name and for the image, we're going to be using varchar. So for the ID, we also would want to create a auto increment. So in that case, every time we're adding a product, we don't need to worry about whether we are using the correct ID, because the table is going to be auto incrementing the ID for us. So once we have set up a ID, now I'd want to have a name. So I'm going to say this is going to be the name for the product that I'm going to be using. And here I'm going to use a varchar. Now for the varchar, we need to have a length of a value. So in this case, let's write that this is going to be, let's say, 100 characters. Now I also would want to use an image. So in this case, we would want to say that this would be image. And here, let's say that this would be, again, varchar. And here we're going to be specifically writing what is the path for the image. So if you notice over here in my files, I have images. And once we're going to be serving from the PHP, we also need to have the same path as I have over here. So this would be image dash, and over here, let's say cupcake 1. So this is where we're going to be placing an image. And last, we're going to have a price, which also is going to have a varchar. So we're going to have a price. And you know what? No, the price is going to have integer. I'm sorry. It's not going to have varchar because obviously this is going to be the value of whether this is going to be $10 or $5 or, I don't know, $15. So once we have created a names for the columns and the type of values that we're going to be holding, we can just click over here, save. And now you can see that it's complaining that I need to enter a valid length. And the reason for that is if we're using varchar, we need to add the length of the values that we're going to be placing over there. Now, once I click the save, you can see that we created a table with 4 columns. And now let's populate. And like I said, we're going to populate only one value over here because I don't see the point of you watching how I'm going to go through 12 values. So in this case, let's start with a first item. And we're going to say that this is going to be first cake. So we're not going to be very original with a name. So we're just going to call this a first cake. And here I would need to specifically write a path. Now, if you're going to be using your own images or you're going to be placing the images somewhere else, obviously you need to remember that you need to write the path that you're using. Now, in my case, like I said, since I know that I'm going to be using a root for the index.html, I can always access the image by just typing image. And let's say over here, cake. And this is going to be equal to 1 JPEG over here. And for the price, let's start with a $5 for the first one and just click go over here. So as you can see, it shows us what would be the MySQL query, how we can place it with a MySQL. However, since we're using the interface, we don't need to worry about it. We can just click wherever we would want, and we're going to be creating the table that way. So in this case, once we have set up our first item, let's check it out what we have in Browse. And notice over here, I have my first ID. Then this would be the name, the image over here, and the price. And obviously, as we're going to be updating the table, the ID is going to be auto incrementing. And then we're going to be adding rest of the values. So like I said, this was a test database that we were just showing how we can create a table and populate the table. So let's go ahead and let's actually import the table that we're going to be using for this project. So let me go back again to localhost. Then I'm going to have a databases. And now let's create a database that we're going to be using. And I'm going to call this database suites over here. Then we're going to click create. Then again, let's do privileges for this database. Again, this is optional. You don't have to do it. But I'm going to add the user. The username actually in this case is going to be John. So this is going to be me. Then I'm going to say that this will be a local host. And now it's complaining that there is already name John that's using some other database over here. So let's just rename this and let's write that this is going to be the Bob. So once I have the Bob, localhost, and now I would need to decide again what kind of password I'm going to do. So let's say over here, secret. So this is going to be my password, and also secret for the retyping of the password. So once I have created Bob and localhost and secret over here, now I can just create this user. So let me go ahead and click go. Now, obviously for you, you'll be creating, if you're going to be creating a user, you're going to be creating your own user. However, let's go back to where we have the databases. So now we have a suites. We're going to click on suites. And instead of creating the table, let's do the import. And let's look for where we have the file within our desktop. And this would be the suites SQL. So this is the database I already created, so we can save the time of watching or going over creating 12 items in our table. So let's click go over here, and you can see that import was successful. So if I'm going to go back over here to the database suites, then I'm going to check the products. Notice that instead of 1, I actually have 12 over here, and all of them have the auto increment of ID. Then this is going to be the name. Again, this is not going to be very original. We just have first name, second cake, and then third cake. And then over here, these are going to be the images that are located in our images folder. So once we have set up a database, we are ready to go to our folder and start working with a PHP of getting this data dynamically to our site. Once we have created database, now I'm going to head back to our folder, to our index PHP, and let's establish a connection with our database. So let's go up on all the way to the top of our document, and let's have a PHP tags. That way we're signaling that this is going to be a PHP script. And over here, let's establish a connection. So in order to establish a connection, first we're going to create a variable with a name of connection. But obviously, since this is a variable, you can name this however you would like. However, this will going to make more sense since the common practice is using something that reflects a connection. Then after that, we're going to use a MySQLi function, and the function name is going to be MySQL connect. And this function is going to take 4 parameters. Now the first one is going to be the host name, which in our case, we know that this would be a local host. Next, we will be looking for a user, which we set it up as a Bob. Well, at least I did. Now, obviously, if you wrote a different name, you need to write a username over here. Then we'll have a password, which would be a secret, again, in my case. And then over here, let's write what would be the name of the database. Now, we should all have suites if you're using the database that I provided. And once we have run a function, there's some kind of return over here in this connection. However, in the purpose of seeing whether the connection is working, whether there were no mistakes made, either by providing the parameters or setting up a database, we need to check if everything is correct. So for this, we're going to use if and else statement. And here we're going to write another function, MySQLi, and the function name is going to be connect and erno. So erno over here. And if this is true, that means that there's going to be some kind of mistake, and we're going to display what kind of error is actually happening. Because it's very hard if you have a silent error to find what is the reason why nothing is working. So here we're going to have an echo. So here we're going to print out something on the screen, and we're going to say something. So let's start with capital letter. Something went wrong. And over here, we're going to concatenate the error statement. So MySQL, and this again is going to be a function, connect, and we're going to call this error. So this would be the name of the function that we're going to be using. Now we're going to run the function, and let's check it out what we have. And also let's create outside the if statement, if everything went well, we're just going to do echo and connection established. Connection established. Once we save this, let's go back to the server and let's refresh over here. And you notice that we have a connection established and we have it all the way on the top. So this would be the echo statement of connection established. And let's change some values over here just so we can see what happens if something went wrong. And as you can see over here, again, my marvelous misspellings are happening. So let's do instead of secret, so let's have another password. And let's say that this is not going to be secret. And now you can see that something went wrong. Access denied for user Bob. So here it says that there's something wrong with the password. So this way we can figure out what is happening. Now obviously you can see that connection established is also echoing because I didn't put it in the else. So let's do an else block over here. And then let's place this echo right in the else block. And let's also add a semicolon here at the end. And let's also figure out why we don't have a space here. So let's save this all. And again, once we refresh, you'll notice that we have a password that says that there's an issue with the password. So this is really helpful because you don't want to be looking for errors that actually don't exist. So you want to know where is the error, why the connection is not happening. And also you don't, like I said, you don't need to use this username or password over here. If you're using Mac, you can just use root and root. So this is going to be by default. And I believe if you're using Windows, then you just have a root. And for the password, you just have the empty value. So if we're going to save it over here, if everything works correctly, we have connection established. So again, it was optional of using the username and the password. You could have just used root and root. However, I think it's just going to make a little bit more sense if we're getting used to adding users to the database that we're going to be using. So let me again change it back to Bob. Let's set it this equal to a secret. And once we have, again, the connection, then let's figure out how we would want to populate the data from the database using PHP. And once we have established the connection, now we would want to query the database to get our data. However, before we do that, you can see that we have already some type of PHP code that is establishing the connection. And we could technically keep on writing wherever we would want to do next. However, this will going to make way more sense if we're going to start separating the PHP that we have written and add it to a separate files, and each file is going to represent what we would want to do. So as you can see over here, we have this includes folder. So I'm going to go over here. I'm going to say that I would want a new file, and here I'm going to write that this would be database PHP. And again, we need to have this PHP extension over here. So let's go back to index.php and let's just grab the code that we write over here and copy and paste it over here within my database PHP. Now also we right away need to have a PHP tags. So let's have a question mark PHP. Then at the end, this is going to be another question mark. And now we have our connection. Now let me delete this echo over here because this is not what we're interested. So let's say over here that this would be else, and we were just going to keep on running. So we'll have a echo something went wrong, and that way we're going to be printing something on the screen. So once we have our database PHP, we can go ahead in the index.html and delete whatever we have for now. However, we also need to use the include statement. Otherwise, this is not going to make sense. So here we're going to need to say where we're going to be looking for the file. So this would be include, and then we'll have a database PHP. And now if everything is correct, then everything should be working the same way. So once I refresh, you notice that we don't have the error, which means that everything went fine. And now we can establish the connection as well as query the database. So here, let's do a query part. And here we're going to have a variable. So let's call this variable query. And we're going to set it equal to a MySQL query. So here for the MySQL, we don't really need about a capital letters. However, let's write them anyway. So here I'm going to say select. Then I'm going to have this star. And then we're going to write from. And now we would need a table name. So if you remember, the table name was product. So in this case, what I'm saying is with a MySQL, I would want to select everything from a products table over here. So once we have set up a query, now we need a function that's going to be querying the database. So here, let's set another variable. This is going to be the result, and the result is going to be equal to a MySQL I query. So MySQL, over here MySQL I, and over here underscore, and this is going to be query. This would be the name of the function, and this function is going to take two parameters. Now one of them is going to be the connection, which we created in the database PHP. However, since we are including this file, we still have access to this connection variable. And the second one is going to be a query, which is the variable that we just created. So here, let's write query. Again, we need a $, which is going to specifically say that we're looking for this variable. And now let's do a var dump function, which is going to show what we have so far, just so we can see that if everything is working correctly. So let's do a result. Let's var dump a result. And if we're going to go back to our file and refresh, you can see that we have results, which is a good news. And now we can just keep on working and figuring out how to make this more readable. So let's go back and let's use another function, which is going to make sure that we're going to be getting our associate array. So in this case, instead of result, we're going to name this products. So let's say over here that this would be another variable of products. Now here we'll right away gonna var dump the products just so we can see the difference between the result and the products. And the products, we're gonna set it equal to another function, mysqli, and the function name is gonna be fetch all. So we're gonna be getting all the data. However, this is also gonna take two variables. The first one is gonna be the result, so the result that we're getting back, and the second one is gonna be MySQL associates. In this case, we're getting back a associate array. So MySQLi, and then we'll have assoc. So once we save it, if we're gonna go back, we're gonna have a different var dump where we're gonna have all our results over here. And again, we can do a view page source and check it out over here. Now we can have our associates arrays. So again, the ID is gonna be over here as a key, and then the value would be 1. And over here you can see again the key is going to be the name, and this would be the first name of the cake. So obviously this is going to be the first cake. So once we have set up our associates arrays, the next on our agenda is going to be a for each loop that's going to loop through all our data and is going to display in our page. Now before we insert the PHP directly into our HTML, let's just work with our for each loop and echo out some of the results that we're getting from our associates arrays. So let me comment out this var dump function over here, and let me hide the sidebar for now, and let's write a for each loop that's going to loop through this product associates array. So we'll have a for each, which would be the keyword. Then we're going to have the name of the associates array that we would want to loop through. So in this case, we would want to have a product. Then over here, we're going to have the as keyword, and this variable is going to represent each individual item as we're looping through the array. So in this case, let's just call it a product, but obviously we can name it whatever we would like. I could name this pants if I would wanted to. However, let's just keep things concise and let's write the code that's going to make more sense. And let's say that this would be the product. Now, once we have the first part of for each set up, let's do the code block where we're going to display what we're getting back from the for each loop. And in this case, let's do an echo, and let's say this is the name of the item, and let's have again a little bit of space over here, and then let's concatenate with a dot what we're getting back. And in this case, we're getting back a product, and since we know that this is going to be associate array, we can access all the values that we have within our associates array. Now I know that we have a key that's going to represent the name, so I can just use a product. So I'm selecting each and every individual item in the array, and then I'm selecting the name of that item. And let's say over here, and this would be a semicolon, and let's go back to our file. Let me refresh, and now we should see every time a name. So as you notice over here, this name is item, this first cake, this name is second cake, and let's do maybe another concatenation where we have a line break. So this is going to make a little bit more sense then. So let's do a line break, and once we save it, then we should have a little better looking array. So we have this, the name if the item is first cake, and probably whatever I'm writing right now doesn't really make sense. This, the name of the item. So we can just say this is the name of the item, and we can just set it equal to first cake or something. So let's put a colon and let's refresh. Now we have this is the name of the item, first cake, second cake, third cake, and as you can see, as we're looping through our whole associates array. Now the last thing, the most fun part, is adding this directly into our HTML and populate our store section with an items. So let me again just comment out the for each, just so we have for the reference. However, let's go down to where we have our store section, and let's place our for each directly into the section that we would want to place. So here, as you can see, that like I said before, we had a row with an ID of store items, and here we have a single item and the other single item. Now first, let's delete one of the items over here. So let's leave only one because this is the only thing we're going to need. Now this would be the row, and this is going to be my single item. Now, since I'm using the Bootstrap, each item is going to be wrapped in a column, and then all the information is going to be placed within the card. So the same way how we were working with a for each all the way on the top of the document, we can place it within our actual HTML. So here we would need to place a HTML tags. Then over here, I'm going to write that this would be a for each loop. Then we're going to write the same thing that we wrote before. So products, this is going to be the array that we're going to be looping through. Then we're going to have keyword as, and in this case, let's again call this a product. However, the case right now is that I would want to place a semicolon, then we're going to place a question mark, and then over here we're going to close this PHP script over here. And instead of writing our code block right within our first PHP tag, we're just going to close first of all the loop. So as you can see over here, I started the loop, so this would be the syntax instead of writing a curly braces, and now I would want to close the loop. So let me check where my actual div ends for the column, and I would want to place this div within my for each loop. So in this case, let's close this loop over here, and let's say this would be PHP, and then we have another keyword which would be for each end. So we have the end for each. So let's again delete, and we have end for each. Now in this case, what I'm saying is that I'm closing a for each loop over here. So this would be the syntax. Again, we need to place a quotation mark, and now this HTML is sitting within our for each loop. So as many products are going to be in my products array, this is going to be displaying on a page. However, we just don't want to display the same item. We would want to change some values over here. And this is where the PHP scripts can be placed directly again within our HTML. So let's start over here with a path to an image. Let me just delete the cake that we have for now. And let's place again PHP tags. So let's have a question mark, PHP. Let's right away close it again with a question mark and a closing bracket. And then let's do an echo. And instead of writing a name, we're going to do a product. And now we know that we can access a image by again using the square brackets. And then we're selecting the key that we have. And again, these keys represent the column names that we had before. So obviously, if I have the name of an ID over here, the column name of ID, then I have the name, then price and image. This is where I'm getting these values from. So first, this is going to be the for the image. Now I can just copy and paste this tag, because the only thing that we're going to be changing is the value that we're getting back from. So first, let's change the image. Then we would want to add the ID for our shopping cart. You notice over here, as I'm hovering over the image, I have 3 items. I have a heart, which would set it to favorites. Then we have a search that's going to search this item somewhere. And then we have the cart. Now for the search, I'm going to set up later on, maybe in a different video, where we're opening up in a different page. So here I'm just want to use the ID. And as you notice that I have my link over here with an attribute of data ID. So let me just copy and paste this over here. And let's place, instead of the image, we're going to have the ID. So we're going to be placing wherever value we're getting back from in this data ID attribute. Now after that, we have a name left. So again, let me delete this. Let me delete the hard-coded name for our item. And let's change again from the product image, we're going to have a product name. Because again, this was the name that we used in our database. And last but not least, we're going to have a price. So let me delete this. Let me copy and paste again my PHP script over here. And instead of image, we're going to have a price. And once we save it, and once we're going to go back to the server and check it out what we have. Once I refresh, notice over here, we have populated our website dynamically using PHP, using PHP admin database and MySQL queries. So thank you guys for watching, and I'll see you on the next video.